dry our hats and faces in the brilliant sunshine. It seemed as if the falls guard their beauties jealously and do not allow the spectator to gaze on them without paying the price of being saturated by their spray. For the next 2 hours, we were taken from one point of vantage to the other, and yet felt we had not seen half of even what is known as the north side. We were shown the barely commenced path leading right away down to the edge of the foaming, boiling gorge, which is to be known as the Lover's Walk. And from its steepness, it occurred to me that these same lovers will require to possess some amount of endurance. We examined from afar the precipitous neck jutting right out opposite the main cataract, its sides running sheer down to unfathomable depths of water, which has caused this rocky formation to be called the Knife's Edge, and along which, up to the date of our visit, only 2 men had ventured. We saw the actual site for the existing railway bridge, which site had only been finally selected a few days before by 2 of the party who were with us. 46. The travellers over this great work now see all we saw on that long morning, and a great deal more besides, while the carriage windows are soused by the all-pervading spray, thus carrying out one of Mr. Rhodes's cherished sentiments. Finally musing at the marvellous and confusing twists and turns of the river, changing in character and appearance so as to be well-nigh unrecognisable, we walked on 100 yards, and came upon a deep, deep gorge, rocky, barren and repelling, at the bottom of which, sluggish and dirty in colour, a grey stream was winding its way, not 100 yards wide, but of unfathomable depths. And this represented the Zambesi after it has taken its great leap, when bereft of all life and beauty. It verily looks tired out. This gorge continues for 40 miles, and so desolate is the surrounding country that not only is it uninhabited by man, but even game cannot live there. The shadows were lengthening and the day was approaching its close. Early on the morrow we were to leave for the northern hunting grounds. We regained our canoe and paddled away to our temporary camp. Again we were delighted with the calm beauty of that river scene, and found it difficult to decide when it was most beautiful whether the morning light best gilded its glories, or whether the evening lent additional calm. We passed island after island in bewildering succession. Away towards the drift, 3 huge black masses were splashing in the water, which we easily made out to be hippopotami, taking their evening bath, and as we glided along, a sleepy crocodile slipped back into the water from a muddy eminence where it had been basking in the sun. Then our canoe ran into a creek where leaves and ferns grew in delightful confusion, and we landed in soft marshy ground just as the sun was sinking like a red ball into the river, and giving way to the sovereignty of a glorious full moon, which soon tinged everything with a silver light, making glades of palms look delightfully romantic. Civilization has since found its way to Livingston. Engines are whistling and trains are rumbling where then the only tracks were made by the huge hippos and the shy buck, but they can never efface the grandeur of the river in its size and calmness, the incomparable magnificence of the cataract itself, the rainbow, which one cannot see without retaining a lasting impression of its beauty, and lastly, that cloud of white spray, seemingly a sentinel to watch over the strength and might of the huge river, for so many ages undiscovered. Many who knew the falls in their pristine solitude have gladly welcomed there the advent of 20th century developments, of signposts, of advertisements, of seats, of daily posts and papers. But others, some of the older pioneers, still, perchance, give a passing sigh for the days when they paddled about the river in a leaky canoe, and letters and telegrams were not events of everyday occurrence. In spite of the railway constructed since our visit, few people, comparatively, have been to northwestern Rhodesia, and yet it is a country of over 400,000 square miles. It was in October 1897 that the then administrator of the country, 47, with 5 policemen, crossed the Zambesi and declared the territory to be under the protection of Her late Gracious Majesty, Queen Victoria. For many years previously the natives, who are not of a particularly warlike disposition, had been decimated, and the country laid waste by the fierce Matabele, who were in the habit of making periodical raids into this fair land, and of killing the old men and the young warriors, who made but a slight resistance, of annexing the attractive ladies as wives and the fat cattle as prized booty, and then of retreating again south of the mighty river without fear of reprisals. For this reason there was, in 1903, a very meagre population for many hundreds of miles north of the Zambesi in this direction. And of cattle, for which there is pasture in abundance, there was hardly one to be seen. One has to travel much farther north and west to find the densely populated valleys, whose inhabitants own Lewanika, chief of the Barotse, as their ruler, who look to the great white British king as their protector, and to the chartered company as the immediate purveyor of their wants. Of these natives the chief tribes are first, the Barotse themselves, who are the most numerous, and who inhabit the low-lying country along the Zambesi Valley north of Seshek, and up to Lialui, their capital. The second in importance are the Mushukulambwe, which translated literally means naked people. This designation was given them as a reproach by their friends, as the male element wear no clothes, and should they possess a blanket, they would only throw it round their shoulders whilst standing still or sitting down. When remonstrated with by the well-meaning missionaries on the absence of any attire, they are wont to reply, "Are we women or children that we should fear the cold? Our fathers needed no clothes, nor do we. They are keen hunters and trackers, essentially a warlike people, tall and good-looking, while the women also are of more than average height and gracefully made. What the men lack in clothes they make up for in their head-dress, which has been so often illustrated, and which is sometimes 5 feet in height. It is the result of much care and trouble, and the cause of great pride to the wearer. Ruled over by a number of small chiefs, they mostly own Lewanika as their paramount chief, and to him they pay tribute. They are withal a curious, wild kind of people, but are now becoming less afraid of, and in consequence less hostile to, the white man, the first of whose race they saw in 1888, when Mr. Sellers 48 penetrated into their country, and very nearly lost his life at their hands. Now they are well disposed, and it is safe to travel through their land with a comparatively small escort. Thirdly, the Batokas. These are and always have been a servile race. They are lazy in disposition, for the most part of unprepossessing appearance, and their country has the Kafue River on the east, and the Zambesi on the south as natural boundaries. As carriers they do fairly well, and while also owning Lewanika's authority, they are well aware of the fact that this chief only rules in virtue of the support of the great king in a far-off land, whom they often hear of, but can never hope to see. In consequence of having lived for so many generations in terror of being raided by their more bellicose neighbours, all these tribes acclaimed with joy the advent of their English protectors, and their demeanour is strikingly expressive of gratitude and respect. This is evinced by their native greeting, which consists of sitting down and clapping their hands together in a slow rhythm whenever a white man passes. Sometimes a traveller hears this clapping proceeding out of the immensely high and thick grass which encloses the road, and he is by this sound alone made aware of the presence of a human being. Their food consists entirely of grain, which they greatly prefer to meat, even when this is offered to them. They boil this grain, which resembles millet or canary seed, into a sort of porridge, which they eat with the greatest gusto, and 1 meal a day seems to suffice them. And now to describe the fatherland of these natives, just emerging as it is from darkness and strife, to prosperity, peace, and, quite possibly, riches beyond the dreams of avarice, but in any case riches sufficiently proved to enable it to take its place ere long among the treasure-producing territories of God's earth. Once north of the Zambesi, and with the thunder of those magnificent falls still ringing in one's ears, 2 things were evident even to the most casual traveller, viz. The changed aspect of the country and of its inhabitants. Of the latter and of their quaint greeting I have already spoken, and as regards the road itself and the surrounding landscape there is a still greater change. Instead of a track of deep sand blocked with huge stones or by veritable chasms of soft, crumbling earth, one finds their good roads, while numerous streams of clear running water constantly intersect the highway. In England it is difficult to realise the inestimable boon this plentiful supply of water is to the traveller and his beasts, who are thereby saved the very serious necessity of frequently having to push on, weary and thirsty, another stretch of 8 or 10 miles, simply because of the oft-heard cry, "No water." The scenery itself is fair and restful to the eye. There are no huge mountains, no precipitous dongas, yet an ever-changing kaleidoscope which prevents any monotony. Now the road winds for several miles through woods and some small trees. Again, these are left behind, and the traveller emerges on plains of yellow waving grass, so high as to hide both horse and rider, resembling from afar an English barley field, and broken up by clumps of symmetrically arranged trees. In these clumps the tropical euphorbia sends up its long and graceful shoots, reminding one of gargantuan candelabra, and the huge baobab, of unwieldy bulk, seems to stand as the sentinel stretching out its bare arms to protect those who shelter beneath. These trees are the great feature of the country, owing to the enormous size they attain, and to the fact that, being the slowest growing trees known, their ages can only be reckoned by thousands of years. Except these kings of the forest, the trees indigenous to the land are somewhat dwarfed, but cacti of all kinds flourish, clinging to and hanging from the branches of the mahogany and of the empani trees, looking now and then for all the world like long green snakes. The M. hoba bush, with its enormous leaves, much loved by the elephant, forms patches of vivid green summer and winter. This shrub is supposed to have been introduced by the Phoenicians, when these wonderful people were occupied with their mineral workings in this land, the remains of which are to be seen in many places. In the grass itself, and round the edge of these groups so artistically assorted by the hand of nature, lies slyly hidden the wait-a-bit bush 49, according to the literal translation from the Dutch, whose thorny entanglements no one can gauge unless fairly caught. During July and August, which is midwinter, the grass plains are set on fire, in parts purposely, but sometimes accidentally. They are usually left intact near the road, for transport oxen find plenty of pasture in the coarse high grass which no other animal will touch. But the seeker after game will burn miles and miles of this grass when it is sufficiently dry at the roots. It has acted as a sheltering mantle for its four-footed population for many months, and now the hunter's moon is fairly risen and the buck must beware. Therefore, if one leaves the road for 2 or 3 miles to the right or left, vast black plains are discovered, on which only about a fortnight after burning a very vivid green, and it is said, a very sweet grass springs up, which game of all sorts greatly love. Here they graze in herds morning and evening, and here probably they meet their death, but of this more anon. It took our party 10 days to reach Calomo, 50, then the capital of Northwestern.